Well, welcome. Part of our political review is to become and stay educated on what's happening on the Hill. And tonight, one of the people that you see around Milford all the time helping us out is here to give us an update. If somebody doesn't know you, why don't you introduce yourself?
Senator Dick Moore. I've served now in the Senate. I'm in my 17th year, so it's representing Milford and Bellingham and communities west to Southbridge, including Southbridge, so 14 towns.
And a person who's at the Claflin Hill and all the other events that we always see you and your darling bride front and center representing.
Well, and I think it's important to get around, and I enjoy it anyway. Much of the certainly Claflin Hill and a number of the events, but it's important to be available for people, I think. And we get in front of. I have I occasionally host a coffee hour. I'm at some restaurant in town, Milford. It's usually Crivello's Crossing, or occasionally Tony's, or one of the spots, and simply that people come in and we pay for the coffee, and oftentimes that we tell them I'm going to be there, and some will actually come in with an issue they want to talk about, and others just they happen to see me so they want to talk about it, and others just thank me for the coffee. But it's those kind of things, and then office hours in the town hall periodically, and gives people a chance. But it's really to be at some of these functions. It's also an opportunity for people to buttonhole me about some issue they want to talk about, or some problem they see with the state.
It seems to make you more human and approachable.
Well, hopefully.
Realistically, when you see you there, listening to the concert with the rest of us, you don't feel like, if I'm going to town hall, okay, I'm back in a political setting.
Mm-hmm.
Feels more formal than sitting there in a coffee, room.
Or people, even at the Claflin Hill Orchestra, at the intermission, somebody might come over and chat about some issue, or they read a column that I wrote, or they saw a vote that I cast or something, and want to either say they liked it or they didn't like it, or whatever that may be. But it's been, I think, this session has been one of the most productive generally for the state, certainly for our area. And John Fernandez and I have worked, I think, pretty well together as a team for the three towns that he represents and I represent as well. And some of the issues are obviously, when they're local issues, they're ones that we're both involved in and concerned about. And I think there are a number of things that we've achieved in this session, or are about to achieve before it's over. That's one of the areas that sometimes people, certainly some of the media, will say when the formal sessions end, at the end of July in the even-numbered year, that the legislature's on vacation, and we're really not. We're continuing to meet. It has to be unanimous consent. Anybody can object to something coming up, but there is a lot of things that still happens, not simply local bills. It was actually a reform. Lou Bertnazzi was involved in it when he was in the Senate. He chaired a committee to reform the rules because people were complaining, particularly the press was complaining, that we were meeting in full session with roll calls and debate and everything else right up until the end of the year. And we had elections, so there were some people not coming back either because they were voted out or they chose to not run again. And the holidays, that was a distraction, and so people weren't necessarily following the issues maybe as best they could. And Lou chaired a committee in the Senate to reform the rules, and then one of the reforms at the time was, let's end the formal sessions when usually anything controversial could come up before we get into the primary season in late August and into September, and ultimately the November election. And certainly not after the November election, so that we're not, the people are done and some of them are leaving and might be more inclined to vote whatever they feel like voting rather than what they think they should vote to represent their district.
The people would want them to vote.
Yeah. And so at that time, and the press applauded that then as a reform. Now they say, well, if they're on vacation, but we don't turn the phones off at midnight on July 31st or stop answering emails or other things of that nature, and we get around and still do the job of representing the people of the area. And it's so we're into the session officially ends the midnight on the first Tuesday of January, and the next day everybody's sworn in for a new term.
So now we're going to go through a whole raft of areas, but always the number one is, how's the economy?
Well, I think in many respects it's certainly a lot better than it's been the last 2 years ago or even a year ago. The state is doing a little better than just under 6% unemployment, which is still about double.
Better than most.
Better than most states, but probably double what it should be. The unemployment traditionally in a good economy is about 2 to 3%.
2 to 3.
And that's usually people between jobs. What we've experienced now here and across the country are people, you had 99 weeks of unemployment potential, and there are people that have expired, gone beyond that, and not been able to land a job. So and it tends to be, unfortunately, it tends to be people in their 50s and early 60s that are well qualified for a lot of things. But businesses are reluctant to take them on because they figure they're only going to be there for a short period of time compared to somebody potentially, hired in their 20s, even though people tend to move around a lot too and don't necessarily stay with the same business. Like years ago, we went to Draper or one of the other standard
job for life,
and you stayed forever. And that's just not generally the custom anymore. But the businesses, we've got several in Milford, BioMeasure, in the life sciences area.
New expansion.
They'll be hiring some additional folks. I know Visha is another one that's done some hiring, potentially do some more. So we're in the life sciences, we're doing well. Got manufacturing that is coming back in Massachusetts and here, certainly here in Milford. But so I think we've seen some improvement. There are, I think, some businesses and probably maybe some individuals are still concerned that we could slip back. Certainly, every time you pick up the paper, and the stock market's been pretty volatile. The European economic situation is a concern, and largely because Massachusetts in
we
particular.
export so much to
Europe.
Europe.
The East Coast, but Massachusetts and New England in particular, a big part of our business is in Europe. And so when they're having a problem, we're going to have some effect of that. So I think there's a good deal of concern about where that's going. At the moment, it's a little calm, more calm than it's been, but that can change.
But every day you hear how Greece isn't making its revenue numbers.
And maybe they'll default, and then of course Italy and Spain and
Spain's
Ireland.
right there behind them, and I mean Italy, the magnitude is scary.
Sure, it is, and it's and then the other shoe is the deficit here, and what Congress, if they'll do anything, what they're going to do about it. And there's some audit because of the agreement they had when they didn't find a solution.
Is the 10% going to happen?
Well, it's a cliff that they keep talking about, and it's a 10% that would have an impact on all of us, and particularly Massachusetts does better than any state on grants from the National Institutes of Science for the health research that goes on. We have a lot of defense contractors still in the state.
Yeah, we forget when you think about NIH, the National Institutes of Health, funding 80% of basic bioresearch. I mean, that we all understand.
Yep.
But you forget how much money comes here from DOD.
There's a lot, with Raytheon and some of the, we've got the Natick labs and not too far away, and folks, I'm sure that we've got people here that work there or have jobs that are spin-offs from the work there. And so that'll have an impact if it isn't done with some degree of sensibility and common sense.
But now, Dick, realistically, do you think they have the intestinal fortitude to step up and say...
I think they've got to do something, no matter who the president is and no matter what the majority is in Congress. The size of the deficit is a concern, and that's because it does drag down the economy.
Can we keep going?
I don't know. And right now, China's starting to have some problems. I just saw a piece on the TV recently where they actually have a reality show of people coming on to basically look for a job. And some people get them. as a result. And so their economy has slowed, and they're one of our help. They're a customer and also they're a banker.
They're buying all our bonds.
Yeah. So there's a lot. There's still, while the economy is looking better, there's still enough dark clouds there that prevent, I think, it from really catching fire.
You know, the last president had $800 billion deficits. You know, and rightfully so, he became a villain because of it. Now we're looking at celebrating that we could bring the deficit down to 1.2 trillion.
Yeah, that's a little higher.
And you sit there and say, okay, if I'm taking money out of my savings account, you know, everybody says we just print money, but eventually, you know, when you look at the value, I mean, I just noticed we're on par with the Canadian dollar. You know,
Which has not been the case for a long time.
yeah,
And it's and I think, but in the state, the budget picture has looked better. It's still not totally flush. We can't do everything that we'd like to do, or that a lot of people would like us to do. But we're.
Would you ever be able to do everything you'd like to do?
Because no matter how much money is there, I mean,
You could always come up with ways of spending it.
Well, hopefully we could always buy Powerball tickets or something and see if we could balance the budget that way. But it's you're never going to have enough to solve every need, because even if everything was being taken care of, somebody'd come up with something
new.
But we're doing better. We were able to actually in the budget this year do better with the school funding. We have increased the general school funding. We increased the money for special education to try to prevent that from drawing too much away from the rest of the student population. We increased money for regional school transportation. So there are a number of areas where that's improved. Plus, there was an agreement made really by some advocates and by some of the unions on one of the ballot questions that was going to be on the ballot on teacher accountability. And so that was, they crafted the legislation, and that's passed. The governor signed it, and so there'll be a different way of evaluating teachers that we hope will continue to strengthen the educational field.
Well, I've always gotten in trouble, especially having a daughter who's a teacher, because I'd like to see every teacher starting at $100,000. But I want two words to go before that: at will. Just like in industry. Right? You're an at-will employee, one of the most easily accountable.
But I have actually, it's a 2-year contract.
Right. And in 2 years, if you're not doing what you're doing, you know, it's just your at-will is 2 years.
Sure.
But the rest of us, if we don't do our job, you know, if we're the bottom 5% of the barrel, I'd rather see people fighting to be teachers and get the most, you know, today I see people who are passionate about teaching, and you get really great teachers because they're passionate about it. But then you get the 5% at the bottom who have lost their passion or just don't cut it.
Well, and some teachers are teaching areas which was not really their first choice or first love. They had, in order to continue employment, they needed to get a different certification.
And why would I want my child spending 6 hours a day with people who aren't the best they can be?
Well, and to be fair, I mean, some of them, when they do switch, actually do become, you know, if they have the right teaching skills and they get interested in the new topic.
And again, Dick, the 90%, yeah. I believe it.
But, you know, some are, you know, I've always thought that if you like your job, you'll do it pretty well, probably to the best of your ability. But if you're not happy in the job, you're not going to do the greatest work, no matter how smart you are.
I will never see where we can pay teachers $100,000 to start.
Well, inflation, you might get there.
Well, yeah, but then the value doesn't. It just kills me when I think that when the kids were growing up, I was lucky to get 2-3 hours a day with them. And here's a group of people that I'm entrusting my daughter for a whole day.
Right. Well, I'm going in Hopedale. I had some great. Our principal, Chick Sales, who was a Milford guy, very much involved in sports and certainly refereeing and umpiring, was the principal and also a math teacher for a while, and done a great job. Made it interesting. Ruth Howard, who just passed away, her husband ran Cahill's stationery store that used to be on Main Street.
Well, I mean, you had Paul
so-
Raftery. You
Yeah,
couldn't get a
Milford,
man
too.
who was more dedicated. You know, those people, it kills me when you say what they're making, they're doing it for